Gracias, Ana Martina. Thank you, Ana Martina. Mi nombre es Ron García Fogarty. Estoy aquí con mi cointérprete Elizabeth McMicken y somos de la Cooperativa de Justicia del Lenguaje Tilde. Hi, everyone. I'm Ron García Fogarty, and I'm here with my co-interpreter Elizabeth McMicken, and we're with Tilde Language Justice Cooperative. Ustedes pueden ver en su pantalla actualmente las instrucciones visuales para unirse a la interpretación. Entonces, primero están viendo las instrucciones por su computadora. Si se conectaron con una laptop o desktop, una computadora de escritorio, pueden hacer clic en el globo que dice interpretación en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y luego seleccionan el canal de idioma que desean escuchar. Esto solamente si no entienden ambos idiomas. Si usted es bilingüe, no necesita unirse a un canal de idioma, pero si se conecta a uno de los canales de idioma, por favor, solamente hablen ese canal de idioma. En otras palabras, si se conecta al canal de español, por favor, solamente hablen español. De lo contrario, va a crear problema de audio para las personas que están escuchando la interpretación. So, próxima diapositiva, por favor, para teléfono. Si se conectaron por su teléfono, van a hacer clic en gracias, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla donde dice, en el menú que dice más, y ahí van a seleccionar interpretación de idiomas y por último el canal que desean escuchar. So, given the instructions for joining interpretation, you only need to join the interpretation channel if you don't understand both English and Spanish. This will be a webinar in English. There may be some Spanish spoken as well. So if you don't understand both languages, I would encourage you to connect to a channel. If you connect with your computer, you're gonna click on the globe at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation, and there you can select English or Spanish. If you are connecting with a phone, you can follow the instructions on the screen, which you would click on the more menu, and then language interpretation, and then you can select the language you would like to listen to. Un recordatorio que por favor hablen una persona a la vez. Pueden hablar en cualquier idioma, inglés o español, pero les pedimos que no hablen demasiado rápido para que podamos hacer un buen trabajo interpretando. A reminder for people to speak one person at a time. You can speak in either English or Spanish as you desire. Just please don't speak too fast so that we're able to do a good job interpreting. Muchas gracias. Thank you. Pass it back to our facilitators.
Thank you so much, Ron, for the instructions. So we are activating the interpretation now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We are having this session today to talk about the information to prepare your taxes for your worker cooperative as an LLC. So if your cooperative is incorporated as a limited liability company, this is the session for you. And today we're gonna have Daniella Preisler. Next slide, please, Matt. Daniella is a peer advisor of the Co-op Clinic, and she's also a worker owner of Colmenar Cooperative Consulting, a cooperative that offers services for worker cooperatives and democratic workplaces with facilitation. She is originally from Chile. She's a consultant since 2017. She also graduated from the Next Economy MBA and is a former worker owner from Home Green Home, where she developed her experience as a leader of the Financial and Administration Committee for 7 years. And she's also the president of Copa Americas, which is the international membership organization for worker cooperatives. So thank you so much, Daniella, for being with us today to offer your wisdom to support us to navigate how to get ready for presenting our taxes and cooperatives. They're incorporated as limited liability company. So I'm gonna pass the mic to you, Daniella. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Ana. ¿Cómo están?
Thank you, Ana. How are you? I hope that we are totally open and breathing freely so we can talk about our taxes, because people sometimes often get very nervous, or people feel that something's missing to be able to understand properly. Humbly, based on the experience that I've had working in cooperatives, I have had the opportunity to be a mentor in things that have to do with taxes for cooperatives, and especially where I was involved in finance and administration of a cooperative. So this is to share experiences. We're going to talk about the agenda, and then we are, so as you said, we just give the welcome. We're going to have a short poll to know how we are and see who's here in the space. And we will talk about the business documents so we can understand, based on the organization that we have, what are the documents we need to have in order to make the tax return files. And we can talk about the individual tax returns for the worker owners. And then we'll have space for questions and answers. And so above all, I would like to ask some questions. You can put the answers in the chat. I would be interested to know who has done their returns as a worker owner here in the United States, or self-employed rather, excuse me, self-employed. You can put it in the chat as yes or no. Yes, thank you. I'm seeing yes, yes, yes. Different people. Elizabeth, yes. Maddie also. That's great. We have a good proportion of people who have this experience. And who here is an associate or a worker owner for an LLC? You can say true or false in the chat. Okay. Great, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Who here is the person in charge of finances for the cooperative? Okay, there's several people. Elizabeth, Marco, Mel, Betty. Okay, Rebecca, lots of you are the ones who are in charge of this. And I would be interested to know who is here because they want to learn, or maybe they're not in charge, but they are interested. And you, or if you want to put your hand up and say, I'm the person. Who are worker owners of their business, but they're not here because they're the person in charge, but because they want to learn and trying to gather more by participating in this type of workshop. Okay. Lila says they take turns. Everybody has the role, and that's sharing of that role. And Kotu said this is something I'm very interested in. And Luz says I work with a fiscal agent. Okay, and the last question, my knowledge of how to manage my business from 1 to 5, I don't understand much about it, taxes, and 5, that I understand what I need to do for the tax declaration. Two and three, okay. We are in a perfect spot. Thank you for participating in this. I hope that we can increase your knowledge and that this will help you to continue looking for more opportunities to learn. And so we can move forward. And I hope above all, I want to say that I am not an accountant. This is for informational purposes, and I'm trying most of all to share my experience and my knowledge. But for whatever specific situation, it's really important to talk to your lawyer or your accountant, the people who prepare your taxes. Next slide, please. So we are going to start with the specific part of the business. So we're going to see what are the business documents, what's the structure, process, and the important dates that you need to know, and the steps and decisions that you need to take. Next slide, please. And so it's very important that we understand the business structure of the cooperative, because this has a bearing or the options that we have for presenting our taxes. In this case, I am talking today about co-ops that are structured legally as LLCs. So limited liability corporations, LLC. And they are paying their taxes through the pass-through system, which means that the members cover they pay the taxes. I'm going to explain this further. And it's also important that if you don't have this, I want to tell you where to look, that we need to have a cooperative that is managed by all the members, not manager managed, which has an administrator. And the reason this is important is that we don't create structures or ways of thinking that's like a pyramid. We want to have reinforce the horizontality of our structures, and so if you have a manager and that person works with you, that's a good option. And then the next thing we want to have are the important documents that we need to have. We need to have the articles of incorporation, and these have to be registered with the state where you are based. And this is what says who we are, where we are, how many members we are, what we do. It's a basic piece of information about the general character of the cooperative. And then there's a little box that you're going to mark when you register, and you'll indicate there where it's managed by an administrator or by all the cooperative. And the next is the operations agreement. And this is an agreement amongst all the members saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to call ourselves this way. We're this place. When a new member joins, we're going to do it in this way. And we're going to share the earnings in an equal way, or we're going to distribute them based on the number of hours each person works for the business. So it is very important to know, you need to look at your documents. If you don't know it already, you have to look at your operating agreement to how you're handling your earnings, and all of this can be shared with the accountant or the person who's preparing your taxes. Also, you need to have your policies because there could be some things that are in the operating agreement that's general, but the detail is in the policies. So it's very important that the person who's preparing your taxes have that information. Next slide. Oh, go back, please. Sorry. Thank you. And it's also important to know about the finances of the business, how to manage the information that's necessary, and offer this to the person who's preparing it. So we have to have the statement of the full state of accounts from the whole year, and you have to have the profit and loss statement. And we need to see everything that was the income and what were the expenses, what was sold, what were expenses from the business, or variable expenses or fixed expenses. All of this is very important information who's preparing your taxes. And the other is the balance sheet. This is what's going to talk about our income and what are our liabilities. And also, this is another area. We are owners of our debts as well as our income and the responsibilities that we have to pay those debts. And what is our little piece of the business? What is our capital account and that we have within the business? And this is where money goes at the end of the fiscal year, where there's income. It's distributed among the members who have capital accounts, who are the worker owners of this cooperative. And we also want to know the income and also the earnings, and where we have to look to share these documents with the people who are preparing the taxes. So talking, as I said, that we have a legal structure of an LLC. It is a limited responsibility for the membership, and this is a pass-through, the profits or losses of the business to the member owners, and pay these taxes through K-1 form. The payments are made through the K-1 form. We have several different types of taxes, and when we are employees, we're going to get a W-2. When we are contractors, we're going to get a W-9, a 1099, excuse me, and we're a worker owner, or we're going to receive a K-1. And this is the information of my taxes and my share within the business.
Cooperative itself is not going to pay in terms of income tax on the profits. It will only pay fees such as a California 800 LLC annual fee, but these are $800 that are paid one time a year, and they are paid in advance. So those who already paid $800 in October or September are going to have to pay again now in March, or actually in April, but you have time to be able to present the taxes of the cooperatives until March 15th. So we're almost there. So to know when I join my cooperative, I have 3.5 months more or less to pay this $800. And then even if I'm very close to April again, you're gonna have to pay again. Only if you register your business after December 15th, you won't have to pay that year, and you'll need to wait till April. So next slide, please. So how do we file these taxes? Is through a form, which is Form 1065, where it's a informational declaration for the IRS, which details what are those income and expenses or profits, deductions, and credits that you had for the people who work in this business, who are the worker owners. And this is presented by March 15th through Form 1065. And you can also file for a section of 6 months. And that's where we also have to know what's a profit allocation and designation. So after this, we have to know how much you have in profits or losses and the capital accounts or the equity accounts for each one of the worker owners. And you can also put it in the reserves if you have an agreement to keep a reserve fund. And many of us have learned during the pandemic that that's a good practice. And it's a good practice to always have at least 6 months of operational expenses in a reserve fund for the business. So when you have profits, don't distribute them all. Keep an amount to be able to have some kind of cushion for the business. So next one. Thank you. Let's review this K1 form. And this form, we'll see over here. I don't know if you're able to see it very well because it's very small on the screen. So this is a form that we're going to be receiving from our tax preparer. And we're going to say on the left side of the form, we have all the information from the business, the information of the worker owner of this business. And then there's a section that states what is my percentage in which I start and end the year, which I have as like a business share. And then there is a section in the section K in which we are going to look at the capital accounts, how much I had at the beginning and at the end of the year. And this is like having a small bank statement of my equity account. So this is going to state how much I have, how much I contributed when I joined the cooperative, and how much I've been accumulating in profits if we've had this practice of retaining earnings as a reserve fund, and how much has been distributed, and also how much is going to come in this year in this equity account or capital account. And so that's an important part of this K1 form. And this is responsibility of the cooperative to distribute this statement to each worker owner. At the end of the year, when you're distributing the profits, it's important for the cooperative to inform all its worker owners to so that they can see what their capital account is detailed. And so on the right side of the screen, you can see your income and how much your guaranteed payments during the year. So in this case, for example, we're looking at, so in number 1, you can see my contribution of this, or how much actually came to me. And then my guaranteed payments are in 4A. And this is what I received during the year. So if we're doing an early distribution of funds, and this is stipulated in the operation agreement, how much is going for each person. And some people ask why there's a distinction between 4A and 4B. A is what actually happened, or B, or actually C, which is underneath. The IRS needs to know how much you would have earned if you had not had any expenses in the business. So that's a difference that you see in this number here. So next one. And so that's all the information that you're going to see in this document. So what's the process for preparing income tax returns? So the first thing is to close our accounting books. So December 31st, you close your accounting book. And so you hoping to close accounting month by month, and that we're not trying to do that at the last minute in December, because that can be very tiring. So that's important that we have a program in which we're carrying out our accounting. I recommend Excel spreadsheets if we still don't have income, if there's not a lot of financial movement. But once you start to have financial expenses, it's important to have some kind of program to be able to register all these transactions. And then we need to review our accounting, how much came in, make sure that all the transactions are being recorded, that all invoices have been paid, and to know in detail who owes us and how much and when they should have paid us. And if they haven't paid us, why not? Also, monthly reconciliations. We hope that at each close of each month at close, it's important to reconcile the month to the bank statement of our business. And so this means that all the same numbers that came in and came out should be the same ones that are registered in QuickBooks or Wave or whatever we use as a bookkeeping or accounting program. And so then we also need to know all the detail of the guaranteed payments for all worker owners. So know if there was any bonuses that they're appropriately registered, if there are any capital accounts that were contributions. Need to review those checks, review that the guaranteed payments were made correctly. Because sometimes we're running and trying to copy and paste in the check, so it's very important to always review and go back. Sometimes it's important to look at a general manner and to do that monthly, this chart of accounts, and to open it, because we also look, whoever is reviewing this type of program, and start to look at, this doesn't look right, this account has a lot of expenses, why is this happening? Or there's something on a monthly basis, and then there's this other expense, what's going on here? So it's important that we start to recognize this, maybe not for all worker owners, but the person who's in charge of keeping up with this software program. Unless you have an outside bookkeeper, then that's going to be their responsibility. But even though, it would be important that you have maybe Excel program where you're registering that same information that that bookkeeper is putting in, and also the registry of capital accounts. If you had new members, if, for example, there was some kind of loan or a credit, it's also important that that be registered. So that's going to be in our balance sheet, where we're going to see this information. And so for the person who's doing the taxes, it's very important to have all that information very clearly, and that there isn't a misinterpretation, because every mistake for the IRS, you have to, there are going to be a lot of extra fees. So we have to be very prompt with the IRS. IRS may be delays in paying you, but they don't have any delays in charging you. So we have to be really on top of all this. So what's important when we're closing our books at the end of the year? So we look at our petty cash is one of the things. And so we look at, for those expenses that were, those little expenses that we're buying, and for those, if we're audited at any point, those expenses that they're gonna ask for some kind of backup, some kind of receipt or some kind of account, whether it's digital or a paper backup. It's anything that's above $75. IRS is gonna ask for a backup for any kind of that expense. So we know that programs of this kind of accounting, they can put telephone number, you can but in our business, maybe we require more of an office structure. And so you always want to have a register of those kind of things in your computer or in a physical file. And I have both things. So it's good to know that we have a place to go review. Because I'm old school, I like to have a backup. I always like to have a second place where I can go look for things. If the internet just fell down, I have my physical printout receipts. But these digital receipts are accepted, and that's important to know. And this is for at least 4 years. That I would say 4 or 5 years. It's important to maintain all this information. You can talk with your accountants what kind of information you want to keep permanently, contracts. You might want to keep all that kind of stuff, legal documents, always keep that. Maybe work orders, you want to keep those, but anything that's things that you could be legally liable for, those kind of documents, you want to always keep those. So next slide, please. Oh, and I forgot to say, you're gonna give your accountant the annual statement of income and expenses and balance sheet. And it's also important to identify the professional services that were used during the year where you paid $600 or more during that year, during that fiscal year. So all those people, we have to report how much we paid them. So we have to ask for that contractor to send us their W-9 form to be able to have that information, because a bookkeeper or accountant is going to have that information to generate the 1099s for those contractors. So if you haven't done it, is the earlier you can get that information, the better. So this timeline to generate the 1099s is January 31st, and it's what all the contractors are gonna need to be able to file their own returns. So it's important to ask for those 1099s. It's very easy to fill it out, to also be able to generate this 1099, which is a way to generate those taxes. Next one.
Please feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions in the chat. If you think it's important, we can do it now or we can wait until the end. But you can also put your questions into the chat or comments, because we're going to try to pay as much attention as we can at the end. Next slide, please. So this is the W-9 form, and this is what you're going to ask of somebody who is who you are paying more than $600 in the course of a year. If you are, in addition to being part of the cooperative, you're also independent contractor, you have your own business, whatever different kind of thing you do. This is the form that it's called the W-9. And if I work for somebody, they're going to ask me of my W-9, and then they send me my 1099. So I have to put my name, if I have a business, if I'm not a natural person, I have to put the name of the organization. It's to designate your type of entity if you're a sole proprietor, a corporation, if it's a limited liability, so it's important to know how to mark the right box. And this is all that's necessary. And also the address of the person and the EIN. And that it has to be put in there clearly, the correct name of the person, correct name of the business, and the correct address and the EIN, which is like a social security number of the business. It's an employment identification number. Without a business, if you don't have a business, then you need to put your own social security number in there, and then you sign it, and that's the only thing that you need to send. And that's the thing that we ask people to share with us in order to generate the 1099s. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, important. And this is, well, I've been talking about the process up to this point, and the business needs to, the accountant needs to know clearly everything all the incomes that have come into the business, who came in, who left as a member. We need to know our capital accounts. They need to know gains and losses, and also need to understand, based on the bylaws, what are the agreements for earnings and how this is going to be recorded for each member owner. And we have to have the social security numbers for all the worker owners of the business. And it's important to know that more detail that we give to the person who's preparing our taxes, more you will make their job easier and to avoid errors. And this is very important. In California, we pay fees at the state level, and also the taxes. So LLCs don't change much, but in terms of the federal, but the state level laws, we realize that there isn't so much change in how you manage an LLC, but it has to do with the administration. So it's important to have this information for the IRS because they charge you a lot of money. And this is a responsibility for members to maintain their information up to date. And this is one of the things that we have to remind ourselves always. If I have any change, maybe I had an I-10 and now I have papers organized and have a social security number, I need to let the business know. If I've changed address, I need to update my information with the business. And this is the responsibility of each worker. You don't have to be chasing after your members in order to know what their information is. And if they don't update it, then that would be an error in the tax return. And so we need to make sure that we have the information correctly on the W-9. And so this is really important to remember. And then at the end, we close the books and we know how much we spent, how much we generated in terms of income, and we need to assign the profit and losses to the owners. And when all the books are closed, then it's possible to say, this is what we have, that is gains or losses. And so the accountant or the person who's doing the taxes needs to know how we have decided what this process will look like within the operating agreements, and it has to be written there. It's a policy that complements what's in the operating agreement. You also need to have that available for the accountant or the tax preparer. And here's where an important decision will come up as a business. Once you know what your reality is at the end of the year, you need to know how to distribute the earnings or the losses. And in our K1, we have to have the total of our losses and earnings. it's not going to differentiate what we're retaining and what we're distributing. Because the taxes are paid over the total amount that is generated. If all of the income was in 2021, then this comes out in your taxes for 2021 for that year, tax year. So it is important to know this, because even if we decide to retain money within the business as a reserve fund or something to help operate the business, this money continues to be taxed within the same year. And the good thing is that when we receive the money that's in the reserve fund, it's tax-free. When we receive our payments of equity, for example, things that we assigned in 2019, for example, where we had a reserve fund of 2 years, and now it's time to distribute the fund that we had set aside, that distribution is tax-free because that has already been paid. And that's good to know. So you have to have your operating agreement, because that's where all the information should be about how your decisions are made in terms of distributions. And if you don't have it there, you need to talk with your lawyer. And this is also important to understand. The first priority for our business is to make sure that the business is healthy and this is our first priority. As worker owners, we need the business to be healthy, to grow, there can be benefits, and something that creates a sustainable life. And so when we take that into consideration, when we do the distributions of the earnings, it's important to think that this is the meetings of all of the membership. This is something that affects everybody. So these are decisions that have to be taken by the entire worker owner membership. And so there has to be this important discussion, thinking about the sustainability of the business. And you need to have at least 6 months of operating costs on reserve for the business. That's a good health practice for the business. And many accountants and other advisors could recommend even up to a whole year. And more is better, obviously, but a minimum is 6 months. And this is something that we keep in our capital account. They're retained earnings that we keep within the business in order to sustain in the event that something should happen. If there's a fluctuation in our accounting, something like that, we have to have that. This is very, very important in order to have a good financial health for the business. I'm going to stop here. Let's breathe deeply. And as we let this information penetrate, we are closing the chapter, or the part rather, of the preparation of the taxes for the year. And now we're going to talk about the tax returns of each of the individual members. And there are some things that I can share with you, but I'm not here to tell you about all of the ins and outs of the grants, for example. These specific things I cannot talk about. I'm going to talk about the general things that we need to do as worker owners of our business. I can share a few things, yes, but I always encourage you to be in touch with your own accountant and tax preparer based on those particular realities. So we're going to talk now about the process of preparing the documents, the documentation that's necessary, and the decisions and steps. Okay. It is important to understand the tax structure when we are worker owners of our own business. We are the people that will experience the impact of the taxes on the earnings as well as the deductions. So we are recognized as self-employed who are also worker owners, and we're going to receive our K-1. But there is a responsibility that starts before the 15th of April or whenever we do our taxes, which comes before the end of the year. And that is that we, as worker owners of the business, have the responsibility to be paying estimated income taxes over the course of the year so that you don't get to April with a gigantic bill that you have to pay or a large amount of taxes that are due. So there is a 1040 ES form, and this is a general form for doing the regular taxes are the 1040. Those are federal and state. Depending on the state, each state is unique, but this is probably what you're going to be looking at. And then the responsibility of each member is to pay their quarterly estimated taxes. And the estimated taxes, they are paid with the 1040 ES form. And every year, every 2 years, the IRS updates this form. And so you can go to the website to get the correct form. And if you have an account with the IRS, you can pay it automatically through the business. Or you can share it with the presentation and links of how to make this type of payment. And you can also print out the document, and there are 4 payments per year. And you pay the 15th of April, the 15th of May, June, excuse me, then September 15th, and then the 15th of January of the next year. That's the last payment for the tax year that's about to close, not the fiscal year. And when you're owner of a business, especially if you have somebody who helps you, particularly if you have several different forms of employment, because there's lots of different forms that need to be completed, and there are things that can get lost or things that are not clear for you. So it's really useful to have a tax accountant that can help you. In addition, it's important that you ask your accountant if they work with a K-1 form, because sometimes they don't understand it, and that so they fill out the tax return incorrectly. So this is something that's important to take into responsibility. So the payment on the income is based on this on each state. Here in California, for example, it's 1.3% for people who are single, and it can't be more than $300,000. And there's a different form for people who earn more than $600,000. In addition, there's a tax for being self-employed, and this is money that goes into the Social Security system, et cetera. So it's approximately 15% of your payments, or income rather, and this has to what goes towards Social Security and Medicare. And this is a benefit that each one obtains when they retire. But if you have an I-10, this is money that has to be paid because we don't have the right to work, the permission to work here, but you do have to pay it without any options. But the good thing is that at some point, if you have a Social Security, you can transfer everything that you've paid through your I-10 to your Social Security account. And this is good to know. We're not going to be left. So remember this. So it's through the 1040, and the 1040 ES is where we pay our estimated taxes. And we do this with anticipation, and we do it from now to the 15th of April. And I know more or less what I earn in January to March, and so I send it in April, between April and June, another short period, and then in July. And when we get, we'll talk to this more, but when we bring all these things to the accountant, we have to tell the dates and the amounts that we paid for each of these different payments, and everything can be done online.
Sometimes I gotta go a little bit more. So what do my earnings include? It includes guaranteed payouts that I receive from my business. It also includes any benefits that I receive from my businesses. So for example, uh, holidays or vacation days, bonuses that I may have received. All of these are part of my guaranteed payouts. They can be called guaranteed payouts or early profit distribution. I recommend when I divide guaranteed payouts on one hand and early distribution profits, where I put everything that's benefits. If we pay meeting times, I put that in a separate section. So what are the winnings? This is the retained earnings and distributed. If you distribute a percentage, and the retained, what was retained in the capital account. So it includes both what was distributed in cash and what was retained. And this will be free of taxes afterwards. It's also important to know that if we have made these estimated payments during the year, when we close the year, until we close the year, we don't know if we have any winnings. Even though we have had made these payments every month to the IRS, maybe there's still a little portion that we haven't paid, which are the earnings, the winnings, which we only knew about at the end of the year. So we might have not had those on the 15th of January. So might be a little bit more that we might need to pay for taxes in that period. So when we arrive to that, so not earlier than that. So next slide. So this form is also an important one to share, which you have to become very familiar with. And you need to fill this out every quarter. So fines or fees are gonna depend. So if we decide to not do 4 payments, maybe the first quarter wasn't very easy. We want to make another payment in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. So if those third and fourth payments in total were cover your income for the whole year, you might not be fined for not having paid in quarter 1 or quarter 2, but it's not something that I can say if this happens, then there will be a fine. It's just, so I recommend doing this. If there's an urgency, you can know that you'll have to pay that in subsequent trimester payment if you didn't make it in an earlier payment. But always try to make those payments. And the cooperative can also provide some support on this instead of each person holding on to this percentage that I'm gonna hold on to pay for my taxes, because this is something that you have to ask the person who's doing your taxes. If I'm earning certain amount, if I'm single, if I have so many dependents, etc. What's the percentage that you would recommend that I should keep, that I should make in these quarterly payments? So that's important to know. So minimum 15%, don't pay less than that, and maximum more than 25 or 30%. 30% is the largest amount that you should put in. Yeah, that could be a way to pay more than you need to and get refunded and not having to pay more later on. The cooperative can also create capital accounts in these bookkeeping accounts, and we can create these savings account, just how we have the capital accounts, but we're going to put them as liabilities. So they're going to be passive elements. So this is money that's going through the business that do not belong to the business. So every quarter, 2 weeks before that, when the first 3 months close, we're going to make these checks. We're going to take all these accounts and we're going to give them this money that they retain. And so each worker owner can make their estimated payments with their personal payment or online with a check. So it's not mandatory then. But I'm gonna take charge of that. The business can't send tax payments to the IRS on behalf of its worker owners, and they cannot make a 1040 payment on behalf of the worker owners. So it's your individual responsibility to the IRS to make these payments. So what else? So creating this savings account that can be supported by the business. Some people might say, I'm not good at saving money. If it's my bank account, I'm going to spend it. So you could create a savings account in the business that if the business isn't able to do it, you can do the same kind of thing. You can be saving that percentage and then you take it out and send the check to the IRS. So perfect. Next one. Okay, let's talk about the steps for preparation of taxes. So these estimated taxes or payments, we did them during the year. So now, if you can use when we arrive to the end of the year, and we have to close, we're gonna have to do a closing of the year to see where we are. And so depending on the different things that we're doing, the different things that we're gonna be receiving, if it's more than one form, I would recommend that you use QuickBooks or Wave. And if you generate a lot of activity, it's difficult to maintain a registry in Excel or in a physical book. But if you're old school, then you keep receipts, and then when you give it to the bookkeeper, it's all clear. And the bookkeeper or accountant doesn't have to untangle a whole bunch of things, but they can be very clear what your income and expenses are. At the end of the year, each business has to generate the forms for their employees, W-2 forms. If they have independent contractors, they're going to generate 1099 forms. And if they have LLCs, if they have worker owners, they're going to generate K1s. And so we're going to be receiving these forms. The bank is also going to generate an interest form in terms of how much interest was retained in the year or generated during the year. So we're going to receive in the mail a lot of different forms. And so these are the ones that we're going to hand over to our accountant. So it's very important if we have an accounting system like one of these, we have to categorize all transactions. We can also do this with the bank's statements because many of them have within their program or in their internet tools, being able to do
sacan información o también puedes
this
bajar.
kind of information, or you can also download these bank statements and you can start to include those in Excel. This is my gas expenses because you need to separate the different types of accounts to know which ones we are able to deduct for your business. And so reconciliation, so you receive your bank accounts and do your reconciliation. Do I have all these receipts? Did I receive all these checks? So have all of that very clear on a monthly basis. And of course, keep all the receipts with any amounts that are over $75, at least for 4 years. And what expenses are going to be deductible for LLCs. So for example, you have to be very clear if your LLC business is going to reimburse you for your telephone, for your miles, is reimbursing all of those kind of, you can't declare those once again in your own taxes. You can't have a double deduction because you can get into trouble for that. So if the business is not reimbursing any of that, then those expenses are deductible for you. And depending on what you do, maybe there'll be uniforms, wash, the startup costs that maybe some of us have put from our own pockets because maybe we didn't have an account by our cooperative, then we can deduct those individually. Professional expenses, automobile expenses, travel expenses. Maybe we're promoters and we're out on the street and we have to think about what we eat, how we get to another place.
No, todos esos gastos son
Maybe we
gastos.
need to make photocopies. So all of those are expenses that we can deduct. And then also expenses like computer, printer, all of those are things that we can deduct. And if we work from our house, and I'm going to talk about this, we can deduct expenses of that sort. We can deduct our telephone, different publicity or marketing different things. So these are generally going to be LLC expenses, but if you have a sole proprietor, if you are consultants outside of your LLC, you can also include those expenses. And common expenses, there might be mortgage expenses. It could be the local estate expenses, sales tax for office expenses or for office location, and also property expenses and also medical expenses and dental expenses that are more than 7.5% of your gross income and are also going to be deductible. So if we accumulate so many X amount of medical expenses, and you have to see if that might be deductible. And our charitable contributions, those could also potentially be deductible, but they not 10 or $20, but it has to be really over $500 to be able to itemize these, to be able to detail or itemize these donations. So all those kind of things. So next one.
Ok, entonces, bueno, como decíamos, para prepararnos, recolectemos nuestros recibos, nuestras cuentas
So we
personales,
collect
ahí
our
vamos a
receipts,
la
our
reconciliación
personal
de las estados de
accounts.
cuentas del
And we do this reconciling with the bank statements and all these anticipated expenses. There is, I do everything by hand, so I make a copy of the check. I make a copy of the form that I sent, and it's important in the 1040 form. I forgot to say before, it's important the information, the way you write it in, that you put it in the same way in that 1040, the same way that you do in the income tax and your return. I would like to go to 1040 form if we can go back.
Here is where you can say your name and your social security number. And if you're doing your taxes with your partner, it is important to include that data. Regardless of what you're doing, you're going to put your first name, and the IRS is going to register that as um, quarterly taxes for that person. But if you're doing it together with your partner, you have to include that person's information as well. Everything that shows up on the first page of the taxes. When you do the taxes, and if you've never done it before, this is like our documentation. This is what our documentation is going to look like exactly. And there's also a question about this form. If people need to file these 1040 ES if the business isn't making earnings. No, if there's no income to declare, there's no income to estimate, then you don't have to send it. And also in the first year, there isn't a fine. The first year of functioning, if you don't send forward these quarterly taxes, that is not a fine. So once we've collected all of our information, as I said, it's important to know what refunds have I gotten from my business, because these I cannot deduce or deduct from my personal income taxes. Next form, please. So, as I said, you're going to submit your quarterly estimated payments, and the person is going to send you with the amount and the dates that you should send it, and you need to send that payment on the dates. And if you worked as an employee somewhere else, you're going to get a W-2. And if you also worked as an independent contractor, you're going to pay with Form 1099. And if you're a worker owner of a cooperative business, you're going to submit your K-1. These are all the different common forms if we have any taxes to pay. If we have investments, there are also forms that have to be submitted, but I'm not going to get into that because that's much more specific and would be really based on your own situation. Next slide. I want to see time. Okay, here we go. So again, as more organized we are, the better. The person who's going to prepare your taxes is always going to be grateful for this, because they're not going to have to go through a large amount of stuff at the last minute. At the end of the information, it's overwhelming. So try to have your information organized and present it to the person who's preparing your taxes. That will be best. Next slide, please. Now, if we work from home, it's important to know if we are the sort of worker where we are based out of our homes based on the pandemic, we can deduce who are self-employed and we are working from home, then we can do a deduction. And there are two requirements for this. One is that this space that we use to do our work is for exclusive use of my business, and it's the principal place of your business. That's where we do our work. Second, and if there are special cases where you don't have to do it, where you can't qualify, if it's a childcare center, then it's a separate form that's special that you have to complete that, and you need to know that. Is self-employed people on the 1040, that goes in Annex C, and that is where it will be detailing the expenses and everything it's costing to be there. The trash, everything can be deduced. And we can look at the next slide. And that's bad news for people who are employees who don't have the chance to make that deduction. How do we calculate this deduction? Well, it can be done dividing the cost of running from the house and the personal business, and how many miles or feet rather is the size of the space that you use. And then you calculate a percentage of this portion of my house is for the business. You calculate based on the percentage of square feet that you're using. And this percentage is what I use to calculate for all of my other bills, the light, the electricity, telephone, that is my percentage. And I can also do a simplified expense where you have a $5 per square foot value, and then the maximum deduction would be $1,500. But if not, you can do a detailed calculation. If you think that your amount isn't going to be higher than 1,500, then do it simplified. If we think it's a higher deduction, it makes sense to complete the Annex C and do it in detail with the Form 8829.
Entonces, ya con esto estaríamos listos, ¿no? Para poder hacer nuestros impuestos. Vamos a hablar, pero como para, aquí yo pongo, antes de sacarnos la foto, no nos olvidemos, separar los gastos personales de los del negocio. Eso es muy importante. Si todavía no lo han hecho, háganlo. Abran una cuenta corriente diferente para los gastos del negocio, anden con 2 tarjetas, si es gas, si es para el negocio, la pago con esta, si es la comida de la casa, la pago con la otra. O sea, traten de separar estos gastos. Es importante no mezclar estas cosas, porque también cuando el problema es si hay una auditoría, va a ser muy difícil, ¿no? Poder como probar cosas.
Daniela, vamos
ajá.
a tomar una pausa porque al parecer no estamos escuchando ya la interpretación en el canal de inglés.
Oh, ok, claro.
Hagamos.
We're about to close.
Ok, ya regresó. Si puede regresarlo unos 30 segundos en su presentación, si se acuerda dónde andaba.
So I think this last piece is, this is the last slide, where it's mostly to help us to think about the things that we can do and be clear how to present our taxes. And we always separate our personal expenses. And when we are sole proprietors, we need to show that that business is separate. You can have a separate account. And it's very important to keep these expenses separated and calculated. And unless we're employees of another business and we're working from home because of a specific situation like the pandemic, that doesn't count as and also we need to include all of the forms that we receive. That includes your health insurance information. Everything has to be put together. And that helps to know how much you're going to pay. But you don't want to pay any more Sometimes the 1040 forms are the little ones that you send in with your estimated payments. If we don't put the name correctly or the address correctly, things can get lost in the system. And so you have to look really carefully to make sure that you've paid, that if there's a change of address, you need to indicate that and make sure that you submit a change of address form. It's easy, but we always have to be attentive. And so now we can open up the microphone, or we can close the screen share. So there are some questions in the chat. If we could go back, maybe 2 questions about whether an existing LLC can use a subchapter S, and they want to know if they can change it to a different classification. I do not specialize in S corporations and who do this type of taxing, so I can't answer this, unfortunately. I am not a specialist in this. I could be mistaken. And there's another question from Nana. We just registered our LLC in Mississippi in February. We want to know if we have to do anything for this year, or do we start filing in 2023? If you registered in February, you have to pay $800 of the exemption, because you pay when the business is registered. And the banking year is a calendar year, and the exemption is paid in the first trimester of the year. And so that will have to be paid. This is a tax that it doesn't going to be of the previous years. So it will depend on what type of forms you will use. And the same person asks, we have one person who's registered with the Secretary of State, and they want to know if they have to add the other people, the other members, and if each new member comes on, they have to submit. Yes. If the people, when you send in your articles of incorporation to the Secretary of State, you need to add who are the members. But the Secretary of State is going to ask you, I think, within the month of doing the article of, you have to incorporation, you have to send the state of the information, and that's where there's all the detail, what we're dedicated to, what the names of each member is, worker owner, their addresses, all of that will be registered. And this this document information form will have to be updated every 2 years. You're going to receive a document and have to be updated. You can do it in advance if you know how to do it. You just get into the web page. It's very easy to do to update the information. But if you don't have that form, there's a cost of $20 if there are changes, but if not, there's no cost. It's very easy to do it. The document comes with a link where you can do it online, and if not, sometimes it comes with the paper forms, but because of the pandemic, I think everything is online now. And yes, these have to be updated with the Secretary of State. It doesn't matter if the people have ITINs who are worker owners. They can be investors in the business. So it's important to include them. I think that's all the questions that were in the chat. And if anybody has a question, you want to open up your microphone, please feel free. Okay, so we receive, thank you, Daniella. Thank you to each of you for being here. but please don't be shy. There are questions. In addition, if I can't answer, I'm not an accountant, as I said just before, but where I can help, don't be shy. The, the taxes are difficult, and there are lots of things to learn. So if you need information, just open up your microphone, and there's no silly questions here. Everything is good.
I just have a question. Good afternoon to everyone, and this is very valuable information. So my question is about the dates. So March 15th and for individual and for April 14th for the proprietary company. And so for the April 14th, you don't have to present on March 15th, right? Because those would be presented on April 14th, right? Yes, that's correct. The filing, so this uh, informational declaration that the LLC is presented, it has until March 15th because it has to generate for these K1s, and the members have to declare their own interests, their own tax returns are on April 15th. So the business entity has to present it on the 15th, and that's where the K1s are going to be generated for the individuals. So does that answer the question? Yes. Perfect. Thank you for asking. I don't know if I was very clear or too kind of murky, but ask any questions you would like. Hi, Daniela. I'm Luz from CBC, and we are an organization that helps to incubate cooperatives and some of the ones that are participating today. So one of the questions I had is that many of the people, you said it, and I think some people understand, but maybe they don't, is how do we fill out that 1040 ES to the estimate? So many of the cooperatives which we work with are very small. It's not like they have 2, 3, 4 employees. They don't have very large profits, so it's hard to estimate because maybe they're earning a lot and other times maybe they're not getting any profits at all. So how they can fill out that 1040 without having a good idea of estimated. So how do you estimate? So think about the total. How much are you earning? So if you have been operating for a year, so keep at least 15% of what you're earning for paying taxes. And so when the quarter is up, we're gonna see if then that quarter I received, I don't know, 5,000. And so of that 5,000, I have my 15%. So if in that next quarter, I only received 2,000, I should be keeping 15% of that 2,000. That might be the first year, but you have to kind of keep an eye out to this. Maybe the percentage and what's gonna depend on how it varies. So it's gonna vary based on my status. If I have dependents, if I have expenses, if I have properties, there's a bunch of things that influence on that estimation. So if I'm not very clear, it's very important to ask somebody who specializes in that. I'm earning this much, I have all these dependents who go in my taxes. How much do you think would be good for me as a worker owner that I should keep as for paying my taxes for next year? So if we have that calculation, perfect. If not, at least 15%. If you don't have dependents, I would recommend you keep at least 25%. It might be that we don't know how much we're gonna earn. Maybe we're paying percentages per project. Every time we do a project, we pay ourselves 60%, but we know that, okay, we got this much, let's keep this percentage right away. So that's the best way of doing it. So at least 15% if I have more than one dependent, 20% if you have only one dependent, and at least 25% if you don't have any dependents. That can be a way to have some calculations. Does that answer the question, Luz? Yes, and that those percentages kind of help if you don't know the income. You can think of those percentages. So thank you. So there's one more question in the chat, maybe the last one. The worker owners have their 1099 and they need to know if need to do the K1s. Who's a person if they can't speak up? Go to. So a little bit to understand. Our worker owners were as contractors with 1099. Are you an LLC, a registered
Yeah.
LLC?
Yes, we're a registered LLC.
Yeah, and you have 1099s?
All our worker owners are classified as contractors, so we get 1099s. But I don't know anything about the K1 form, which is precisely why I'm here.
Okay, so como LLC, okay, so as an LLC, a registered, well, voy a seguir en español, perdón, para que
I'm gonna keep on going in Spanish, and you can hear the interpreting. So an LLC, if the LLC has to generate K1s, even if it's zero amount, I understand, and I've seen this situation that LLCs pay their worker owners as contractors, but what's going to happen is that there's going to be a duplicity in terms of your data, and the information is going to get complicated. And I've been in many chats of accountants, and it's not something they recommend doing when they're worker owners of an LLC. They have to receive the K1s. They have to receive their guaranteed payment. Now, if you have it stated this other way in your operation agreement, I would encourage you to review it with a CPA to look at the best way. My understanding is that you should understand a K1 even if that total is zero, because that's a document that's generated for worker owners. So even if you receive as contractors, you're going to receive earnings, profits or losses, and that's going to be registered in the K1, or it should be. So if you have not done the taxes, that's the K1 is going to come that way. It's going to come that way, even if it's a profit distribution. So you're going to receive a 1099 for your information, which is not bad, but you're also going to receive a K1 with your profit distribution or profit losses or losses. Thank you, Daniela. Very important information. Thank you to the interpreters. Here's the information for Daniela if you want to stay in touch with her. And Daniela is part of a cooperative that provides technical support to co-ops, so you can be in touch with her about that. And she's also part of a network that we have here in the Federation of people that come from cooperatives that also provide counseling to cooperatives. So if you want to request additional support, you can be in touch with us here at the Federation. And this is a co-op clinic, and we have more events that are coming up. We'll have another seminar about the initial membership quotas and also the trial period. And on April 20th, we have another one about the compensation for founders. And so you can see this information on our website. And thank you everyone for participating today. And have a great rest of your day.